The day Earth answered genocide, with something far worse than war, reached its shattering climax as Admiral Marquez faced an impossible choice. Allow Dr. Cho's psychic weapon to mentally torture an entire alien species, or sacrifice humanity's last defenses. With orbital platforms exploding like dying stars above, Elena chose mercy over vengeance, saving both species from becoming the monsters they once feared. The silent halls of the International Council stretched before Admiral Elena Marquez, her footsteps echoing against marble floors that once bustled with the representatives of Earth's unified nations. Now, they stood empty, a monument to what humanity had lost. She paused at the center of the Grand Chamber, where a holographic memorial flickered with the names of billions. Each scrolling designation represented a life extinguished in the Velkar Purge. Fathers, mothers, children, all reduced to data points in humanity's near extinction. "Admiral," Lieutenant Saleh's voice broke through her reverie. "The fleet is assembled in lunar orbit. We await your command." Elena nodded, her weathered face revealing little emotion. At 58, she wore the scars of survival like medals, a long slash across her right cheek from the evacuation of New Singapore, burned tissue patterning her left hand from the defense of Mars colony. Her dark hair, once jet black, now streaked with silver, was pulled back in a severe military bun that emphasized her sharp features and penetrating eyes. "Schedule the memorial service for 0800 tomorrow," she said. "The century mark deserves proper acknowledgement." "Yes, Admiral," Saleh hesitated. "Will you be speaking?" Elena turned from the memorial, her gaze drifting to the panoramic window that revealed Earth's surface below, lush forests and blue oceans that had reclaimed concrete jungles and industrial wastelands. From orbit, it appeared pristine, peaceful. Only those who knew history understood the terrible emptiness of that beauty. "No," she finally answered. "The dead have heard enough of my promises." As they walked toward the transport bay, subtle electronic pulses rippled through the station systems, imperceptible to most. But Elena had spent decades studying the defense grid's architecture. Something was changing, activating. She said nothing, but her stride quickened slightly. The Earth Defense Fleet represented humanity's painful resurrection. For nearly a century, the survivors of the Velkar genocide had hidden, rebuilt, and prepared. What had once been scattered refugee ships now comprised over 200 warships, research vessels, and colony supports. From the smallest habitats hidden in asteroid belts to the largest deep space installations, humanity had transformed itself from prey into a force with teeth. Yet the surface of Earth remained untouched, a memorial and a warning. The orbital defense platforms circling the planet stood as silent sentinels, their weapon systems dormant but maintained. The Accords had established Earth as a sanctuary, off-limits to both human recolonization and alien visitation. Some called it wisdom, others named it cowardice. Elena knew better. Earth was neither sanctuary nor memorial. It was bait. The briefing room aboard the flagship Resilience hummed with subdued conversation as senior staff assembled. Tactical displays showed the positions of known Velkar outposts throughout the solar system, the massive Jupiter station that served as their local headquarters, the mining operations on Saturn's moons, the research outposts scattered through the asteroid belt. After their campaign of extermination a century ago, the Velkar Confederation had accepted Earth's surrender. They believed they had broken humanity's spirit, leaving only enough survivors to serve as a cautionary tale to other species who might resist Velkar expansion. Their eight-limbed forms and compound eyes had become the stuff of human nightmares. Their chittering speech, the soundtrack to genocide. What they didn't know, what Elena and a handful of others had ensured they never discovered, was that humanity's surrender had been a ruse, a desperate gambit to buy time. "Ambassador Wu's transmission is scheduled in 5 minutes," Security Chief Ramirez announced, his bulky frame settling into a chair designed for someone half his size. He reports unusual activity among the Velkar diplomatic corps. Elena nodded. Display his transmission when it arrives. I want everyone to hear this firsthand. Wu had been humanity's official representative to the Velkar for 15 years, a thankless position requiring him to bow and scrape before the very species that had slaughtered his family. Elena sometimes wondered how he maintained his sanity, playing the role of the grateful, conquered servant. Their friendship stretched back to the refugee camps of Titan, where they had both lost everything except their determination to survive. The minutes ticked by. 5 became 10. 10 became 15. Still no transmission. Admiral, the communications officer reported, her voice tight with concern. Elena was about to order a discreet probe of Velkar communications when every alert on the bridge activated simultaneously. Red emergency lighting bathed the room as data streams flooded the monitors. Velkar sensor nets throughout the system are going dark, Ramirez reported, his fingers flying across multiple screens. Communication arrays on Mars, Europa, and Titan have ceased all transmissions. Attack pattern, Elena demanded, already moving toward the tactical station. Negative, Lieutenant Salaire answered, confusion evident in his voice. No weapon signatures, no ship movements. They're just shutting down. A garbled transmission cut through the chaos, the distinctive chittering of Velkar speech, but distorted, fragmented. Human treachery, psychic cascade. They've gone too far, help us. The message terminated in a burst of static that made several officers flinch. Elena remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the tactical display as, one by one, Velkar signatures across the solar system began to blink out. Get me visual on the Jupiter station, she ordered. The main screen shifted to show the massive Velkar headquarters orbiting the gas giant. The structure appeared intact. No visible damage, no signs of attack. But the normal patterns of traffic around the station had ceased. Several Velkar vessels drifted aimlessly, their navigation lights flickering erratically. What's happening to them? Saleh whispered. Elena's jaw tightened as she recognized the pattern. The subtle electronic pulses she'd detected earlier in the council station now magnified 1,000-fold. Prepare a stealth insertion team, she said. We're going to board that station. The shocked silence that followed told her everything about her staff's reaction. No human had willingly approached a Velkar installation since the genocide. Admiral, Ramirez began, with respect. I need eyes inside. Elena cut him off. If the Velkar are under attack, we need to know by whom. If they're experiencing some kind of internal failure, we need to understand it before it affects our systems. What she didn't say, what she couldn't say without revealing secrets buried for a century, was that she recognized the signatures of Earth's last, desperate weapon, the one that had never been meant to be used. Lieutenant Saleh, Security Chief Ramirez, you're with me. Assemble a team of 6, medical, technical, and combat specialists. We launch in 30 minutes. As the officers dispersed to carry out her orders, Elena retreated to her private quarters. From a hidden compartment in her desk, she withdrew an ancient data crystal, one of only 3 in existence. The authorization codes within it would either save humanity or condemn it. She hoped she wouldn't need to use it. The stealth shuttle approached the Velkar flagship under minimal power, its adaptive hull absorbing sensor sweeps. Through the viewport, Elena studied the massive vessel. Velkar architecture favored asymmetrical, organic shapes. This particular ship resembled nothing so much as a crystalline insect, its multiple segments glowing with internal bioluminescence. No response to our approach, Saleh reported. Their automated defense systems appear inactive. Life signs? Elena asked. Inconclusive, the medical officer responded. We're detecting the correct number of Velkar signatures, but the readings are abnormal. Elevated neural activity, erratic cardiovascular patterns. Like they're all having nightmares, Ramirez muttered. Elena shot him a sharp look. His assessment was too close to what she feared. Their shuttle docked with an auxiliary maintenance port, bypassing the main airlocks where Velkar guards would normally be stationed. The team cycled through decontamination protocols before stepping into the alien vessel's corridors. The interior of the flagship was eerily silent. The normal background hum of Velkar communication, a constant chittering that humans found deeply unsettling, was absent. Instead, occasional keening sounds echoed through the passages, rising and falling like distant cries. "Breathers on," Elena ordered. Although Velkar atmosphere was technically compatible with human respiratory systems, she wouldn't take chances. "Weapons tight, but be prepared. We don't know what state they'll be in." They moved through curving corridors, lined with the bioluminescent material that served as both lighting and information display for the Velkar. The patterns flickered chaotically, no longer forming the organized data streams that normally flowed through the ship's systems. Their first encounter with a Velkar came at an intersection of three passages. The alien lay on the floor, all 8 limbs twitching spasmodically. Its compound eyes flashed rapidly between the red-black of aggression and the pale blue of extreme fear, emotional states that should never occur simultaneously in their species. The medical officer knelt beside the creature, scanner in hand. "It's conscious, but completely unresponsive to external stimuli. Massive neurological activity in the centers, responsible for memory processing and fear response." "Can you help it?" Elena asked. "Not without understanding what's causing this." The officer hesitated. "Admiral, these readings, it's as if its mind is trapped in some kind of feedback loop." They found similar scenes throughout the ship. Velkar officers collapsed at their stations, engineers huddled in corners, security personnel frozen in firing stances against enemies only they could see. None acknowledged the human team's presence. In the ship's central command hub, Elena discovered what she sought. The holographic logs were still active, replaying the moments before whatever catastrophe had struck. The images showed the Velkar High Commander receiving a transmission from Earth. "That's impossible," Saleh breathed. "All Earth communications go through approved channels. Nothing broadcasts directly from the surface." Elena said nothing, watching as the hologram showed the High Commander's reaction. Initial confusion, then mounting horror as information scrolled across their command interfaces. The last clear image before the system degraded showed the commander attempting to initiate emergency protocols as their subordinates began to collapse around them. "Download everything," Elena ordered. "I want these logs secured and encrypted." While her team worked, Elena moved to an adjacent chamber, the Velkar equivalent of a strategic planning room. There, embedded in the ship's systems, she found encrypted human transmissions. Using her command codes, she unlocked the data stream. The information confirmed her worst fears. At the moment of Earth's surrender a century ago, human scientists had activated a network of psychic emitters buried deep within the planet's crust. The technology, experimental, unstable, and profoundly unethical, had been designed to target the unique neurological structure of Velkar minds. Unlike conventional weapons that destroyed bodies, this one attacked consciousness itself. It created a cascade effect in Velkar neural patterns, trapping them in recursive loops of their worst memories and fears. The effect had been designed to be subtle, cumulative, and irreversible, a time bomb in the minds of every Velkar who had participated in the genocide of humanity. And now, a century later, that bomb had detonated. "Admiral," Ramirez's voice drew her attention from the terminal. "You need to see this." He led her to a secondary control room, where long-range sensor data was displayed. The holographic projection showed Velkar ships throughout the system, all dead in space or moving on erratic trajectories. More alarming were the vessels at the edge of the solar system, Massive battlecruisers inbound from Velkar territory. Their weapon systems fully powered. Automated response, Elena concluded. Their central command must have triggered a defensive protocol when they realized they were under attack. Under attack by whom? Saleh demanded. We haven't fired a shot. Elena met his gaze steadily. By us, Lieutenant. By Earth. The shuttle ride back to the Resilience was tense with unspoken questions. Elena ordered a full fleet alert as soon as they docked, mobilizing every available ship to defensive positions near Earth. Brief the senior staff, she instructed Ramirez. Tell them we're facing a potential Velkar counterattack, but I want you and Saleh in my ready room first. Once the door sealed behind them, Elena activated the highest security protocols, cutting off all recording devices and external communications. What I'm about to tell you violates every oath of secrecy I've taken, she began. But the situation has evolved beyond the parameters of the original plan. She described what they had discovered, the psychic weapon embedded in Earth itself, designed to avenge humanity's near extinction by inflicting a living death upon their executioners. This was authorized. Saleh's voice shook with disbelief. By whom? By the last functioning remnant of Earth's governments, Elena replied. The weapon was developed in secret during the final days of the Velkar invasion. When surrender became inevitable, the project leads convinced the remaining leadership that this was the only way to ensure the Velkar would eventually pay for their crimes. And you knew about this? Ramirez asked, his expression unreadable. I knew something had been left behind. The specifics were compartmentalized, known only to a handful of scientists and key military personnel. Elena's gaze hardened. What I didn't know was that it would activate now, or with such thoroughness. So Earth has been what? A giant trap? For 100 years? Saleh paced the small room. This violates everything we've rebuilt, every principle of the new colonies, every ethical standard we've established since the war. It violates more than that, Elena said quietly. Based on what I saw on that ship, this weapon constitutes a new form of genocide, one where the victims remain alive but trapped in perpetual psychological torment. Ramirez crossed his massive arms. The Velkar slaughtered billions of us. They sterilized entire continents. They hunted down children. His voice remained even, emotionless. Some would say they deserve whatever hell we can create for them. And that thinking makes us no better than they were, Saleh snapped. Enough. Elena interrupted. Moral debate can wait. Right now, we have Velkar battlecruisers inbound, and we need to determine if this weapon can be deactivated before they arrive. You want to help them? Ramirez asked, incredulous. I want to prevent another war, Elena countered. One we might not survive this time. The three officers stared at each other, the weight of a century's grief and hatred hanging between them. Finally, Ramirez nodded. What do you need from us, Admiral? I need to find the architect of this weapon, she answered. And I have a feeling I know exactly where to look. The Earth Defense Fleet assembled in high orbit, a formation of ships that represented humanity's resurrection from the ashes of genocide, from the bridge of the Resilience. Elena surveyed the tactical display. The incoming Velkar battlecruisers would arrive within 12 hours, each one capable of destroying dozens of human vessels. All ships report ready, Admiral, Saleh announced. But against that kind of firepower, we won't engage unless absolutely necessary, Elena replied. Commander Ramirez, status of the surface expedition. Team is approaching the coordinates now. Ramirez reported from the operations center. Underground complex beneath what used to be Geneva. Preliminary scans show active power signatures. Elena nodded. Keep me updated. I'm going down there. Admiral, with respect, Saleh began. This isn't a debate, Lieutenant. Elena's tone brooked no argument. If what I suspect is correct, the creator of this weapon is still alive down there, and they're the only one who can deactivate it before those battlecruisers arrive. The shuttle descent to Earth's surface was smoother than Elena expected. For a planet supposedly abandoned for a century, the automated landing systems functioned with surprising efficiency. They touched down in a clearing that had once been the heart of Geneva's diplomatic quarter. Now, trees and undergrowth reclaimed concrete foundations, with only the occasional gleam of metal or fragment of wall suggesting civilization had ever existed here. The expedition team had already secured the entrance to the underground complex, a hidden elevator shaft concealed beneath what had once been the International Science Foundation. Elena stepped from her shuttle into air that smelled of pine and recent rain. Clean, fresh. Nothing like the recycled atmosphere of space habitats. No signs of wildlife larger than rodents, Admiral, the security officer reported. And the entrance was sealed until we arrived. Any communication from inside? Nothing, ma'am. But the power systems are definitely active. Elena checked her sidearm, a precaution she hoped wouldn't be necessary, and led the way into the elevator. The doors closed with a soft, pneumatic hiss, and they began their descent into Earth's secrets. The complex spread beneath them, like a buried city. Corridors branched in multiple directions, all impeccably maintained by automated systems. The air held the sterile quality of filtered circulation, with subtle undertones of machine oil and electronics. Life support has been running continuously, the environmental specialist noted, configured for human physiology. They followed the main passage toward the central chamber. Along the way, Elena observed laboratories filled with equipment she barely recognized, devices that hummed with quiet energy, displays that tracked data streams from across the solar system. The doors to the central control room opened at her approach. Inside, a single figure stood before a bank of holographic displays, an elderly woman with silver hair, dressed in a simple gray jumpsuit. She turned as Elena entered, revealing Asian features set in an expression of clinical detachment. "Admiral Marquez," the woman said. "Right on schedule. I've been expecting you since the cascade fully activated." "Dr. Hanacho," Elena replied. "You're supposed to be dead. Your name is on the memorial." Dr. Cho's thin lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Many names on that memorial belong to people who never died. Some of us had work that couldn't be abandoned." "Work?" Elena gestured to the displays showing Velkar ships with crews locked in neural torture. "You call this work? This is an atrocity." "This is survival," Dr. Cho countered calmly. "The ultimate deterrent. The Velkar understand only one language: absolute power. We gave them a century to reflect on their crimes, while the cascade built slowly in their neural networks. Now they understand the consequence of attempting to exterminate us." The cold precision in her voice chilled Elena more than any shouted defense could have. This wasn't the ranting of a madwoman. It was the calculated assessment of a scientist who had spent a century perfecting revenge. "Dr. Cho, Velkar battlecruisers are currently inbound to Earth. If this weapon isn't deactivated, they will destroy our fleet and any human colonies they can find. You haven't created deterrence. You've restarted a war we cannot win." "Those ships are automated responses," Cho replied. "Their crews are already affected by the cascade. Within hours, every Velkar who participated in the genocide will be trapped in their own personal hell, a fitting punishment for what they did to us." "That was a century ago." Elena's composure finally cracked. Many of the Velkar alive today weren't even born when the genocide occurred. Their entire society celebrated our destruction. Cho's voice remained eerily calm. "They built their expansion on our graves. Now they pay the price." A proximity alert interrupted their confrontation. Ramirez's voice came through Elena's communicator. "Admiral, the Velkar ships have accelerated. They'll reach Earth orbit in less than 3 hours. And something else. We're detecting massive energy buildups in the defense platforms surrounding Earth." "What kind of energy?" Elena demanded. matching the signatures we found on the Velkar flagship, the psychic cascade. The platforms are amplifying it, directing it outward. Elena turned back to Dr. Cho, who watched her with the dispassionate interest of a scientist observing an experiment. The defense grid was never meant to protect Earth from invasion, Elena realized aloud. It's part of your weapon. The most elegant solution, Cho confirmed. Use their own fear of our retaliation to position the final delivery system. The platforms contain amplifiers that will extend the cascade effect throughout Velkar space. Not just this solar system. Everywhere they exist. Horror dawned on Elena as she grasped the full scope of the plan. You're talking about the mental torture of an entire species. I'm talking about justice, Cho replied, and insurance against this ever happening to humanity again. Outside the complex, thunder rolled across Geneva's empty landscape. Not weather, but the sonic booms of vessels entering atmosphere. The Velkar automated ships had arrived early, their targeting systems locked on the source of the psychic emanations. We need to evacuate, Ramirez urged through the comm. Orbital strike's imminent. You can't leave, Dr. Cho said, her composure finally showing cracks. The system needs protection during the final activation sequence. If it's damaged now, the cascade could collapse. That's what I'm counting on, Elena replied. She drew her sidearm and aimed it at the central control console. Shut it down, Doctor. End this atrocity now. Cho's eyes widened. You would betray your own species, after everything they did to us? I'm trying to save both species from another century of horror, Elena countered. Deactivate the cascade, or I'll destroy the controls and take my chances with the system failure. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Cho's features. You don't understand what you're risking. The cascade is integrated with Earth's geothermal network. A sudden shutdown could trigger tectonic instability. Better than the alternative. The facility shook as the first impact struck nearby. Dust sifted from the ceiling, and warning lights activated throughout the complex. Admiral! Saleh's voice came through the comm. The defense platforms are activating. They're targeting the Velkar ships, but the energy signatures are off the charts. If those platforms fire at full capacity, the cascade will spread throughout known space, Cho finished, a note of triumph returning to her voice. It's too late to stop it now. The final sequence is already initiating. Elena assessed her options with the rapid calculation of a battlefield commander. The control room offered access to Earth's orbital defense grid, a system she had studied extensively during her rise through the ranks. If she could override Cho's protocols, she might be able to redirect the platform's energy. But the cost would be catastrophic. Everyone out, she ordered her team. Return to the shuttles and prepare for immediate evacuation. Admiral? Ramirez questioned. That's an order, Chief. Get our people to safety. As her team reluctantly withdrew, Elena turned back to Dr. Cho. I'm giving you one last chance. Help me shut this down safely. For a moment, something like doubt crossed the scientist's features. Then her expression hardened again. There is no safely anymore, Admiral. There never was. Not since they came and burned our world. Another impact rocked the facility, closer this time. Emergency lighting kicked in as the main power fluctuated. Then I'll do it myself, Elena said. She holstered her weapon and moved to the main control interface. Her Admiral's authorization codes would give her access to the defense grid. If not the psychic cascade itself, it would have to be enough. You'll destroy everything we've worked for, Cho protested, moving to block her. A century of preparation, the only weapon that can truly protect us. This isn't protection, Elena replied, pushing past her. It's annihilation with a different face. Her fingers flew across the interface, bypassing security protocols and accessing the orbital platform controls. The system recognized her command codes, but revealed the terrible choice before her. The psychic cascade was indeed integrated with Earth's geothermal network. Shutting it down completely would trigger seismic events that could render the planet uninhabitable. The only alternative was to redirect the energy, to use the defense platforms to absorb and disperse the cascade's power. But those platforms were humanity's last line of defense. Sacrificing them would leave Earth vulnerable to any future attack. The facility shook again, support beams groaning under stress. A section of ceiling collapsed nearby, narrowly missing Dr. Cho, who stumbled against a console. "You can't do this," she gasped, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. "You'll leave us defenseless." "We'll rebuild defenses," Elena answered, finalizing the command sequence. "But we can't rebuild our humanity if we let this continue." She activated the override. Throughout Earth orbit, the defense platforms suddenly shifted configuration, their weapons turning inward instead of outward. They began to absorb the psychic energy emanating from the planet's surface, drawing it away from the Velkar ships and containing it within their own systems. On the monitors, Elena watched as Velkar vessels that had been drifting aimlessly began to stabilize. The cascade effect was weakening as the platforms redirected its energy. But the strain was too much. One by one, the orbital platforms began to overload, exploding in brilliant flashes that illuminated Earth's atmosphere like artificial stars. "You've doomed us," Cho whispered, watching the destruction. "I've saved us," Elena corrected, "from becoming worse than those who tried to destroy us." The facility's structural integrity was failing rapidly now. Elena grabbed Cho's arm. "We need to evacuate. This entire complex is coming down." "Leave me," the scientist said, suddenly sounding every year of her century-long vigil. "My work is here." "Your work is finished," Elena replied firmly. "But you'll answer for it to more than just me." She half-dragged the elderly scientist through collapsing corridors, meeting Salesh and Ramirez at the elevator shaft. The lift itself was no longer functional, forcing them to climb emergency ladders as the structure crumbled around them. They emerged into daylight, just as their shuttle's autopilot initiated emergency liftoff procedures. Racing across uneven ground, they barely made it aboard before the craft shot skyward, escaping the massive sinkhole forming where the underground complex had been. From orbit, Elena watched as the last of the defense platforms disintegrated, their sacrifice completing the containment of the psychic cascade. Earth itself seemed strangely peaceful below, its wilderness unaware of the moral catastrophes that had just unfolded above it. "Admiral," Saleh reported, "the Velkar ships are withdrawing to a stable orbit. Their weapon systems are powering down. And their crews. Medical teams report the cascade effects are diminishing. Many Velkar are regaining consciousness, though the psychological trauma appears significant." Elena nodded, her gaze shifting to where Dr. Cho sat under guard, her face a mask of resignation and defeat. "Have Ambassador Wu been located?" "Yes, ma'am. He was on the Jupiter station when the cascade activated. He's shaken but recovering. Tell him I need him to arrange an emergency summit. Both species need to face what's happened here." "A summit?" Ramirez questioned. "After this?" "Especially after this," Elena replied. "We've both now seen the worst we're capable of. Perhaps that's where understanding finally begins." The joint Earth-Velkar summit convened 3 weeks later, aboard a neutral station at the Lagrange point between Earth and its moon. The setting itself represented a painful symmetry, constructed from components of the destroyed defense platforms, now repurposed for diplomacy rather than destruction. Elena stood at the chamber's center, facing representatives of both species. The Velkar delegation moved with the awkward hesitation of those still recovering from profound trauma. The human representatives appeared equally uncomfortable, many openly distrustful of sitting across from their former executioners. "We gather today to acknowledge crimes that span a century," Elena began. "Genocide answered with psychological torture, extinction countered with living death. Two species that found ways to inflict unimaginable suffering upon each other. She gestured to where Dr. Cho sat, flanked by security officers. The architect of humanity's revenge has agreed to explain the weapon she created, not to justify it, but to ensure both our peoples understand precisely what happened and why it can never happen again. Cho rose slowly, her frail form belying the devastating impact of her life's work. For the first time, emotion broke through her clinical detachment as she faced the assembled delegates. "I watched my family burn when the Velkar came to Earth," she said, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "My husband, my children, my parents, all reduced to ash in an afternoon. I survived only because I was working underground at a research facility. When I emerged, everything I loved was gone." Several of the Velkar representatives made the subtle limb movements that indicated discomfort in their species, but none interrupted. "I designed the psychic cascade not from hatred, though I carried that in abundance. I designed it from fear that humanity would never be safe as long as those who had tried to exterminate us remained unpunished and unconstrained." She described the technical aspects of the weapon, how it had been calibrated to affect only those Velkar neural patterns associated with participating in or celebrating the genocide, how it had been designed to build slowly over generations, creating a deterrent that would eventually activate if the Velkar ever moved against human colonies again. "What I failed to calculate," she concluded, "was how the weapon would evolve beyond its original parameters, how it would spread to affect even those Velkar born long after the genocide. In my pursuit of justice, I created something that threatened to become exactly what I despised, another genocide, only more cruel for leaving its victims alive to suffer." A Velkar representative rose, one Elena recognized as a sub-commander who had been aboard the Jupiter station. "Our ancestors believed your species weak, limited by emotion and sentiment." The alien speech translator rendered in flat tones. "They sought to eliminate a perceived threat before it could mature. In doing so, they revealed their own weakness, the inability to recognize sentient worth beyond their own kind." The Velkar's compound eyes shifted through color patterns that Elena had learned to recognize as complex emotional states. Regret, shame, resolve. "We have experienced what you created, Dr. Cho. Our minds were forced to relive not only our own actions, but the suffering of those we harmed. This understanding cannot be unlearned. Though the weapon has been disabled, its echo remains in our consciousness." In the days that followed, both species confronted uncomfortable truths. The Velkar acknowledged the full scope of their campaign against humanity, not just the deaths, but the cultural annihilation, the deliberate targeting of children and historical archives, the attempt to erase humankind from the galaxy's memory. Humanity, in turn, faced the reality of what their leaders had authorized in the name of survival, a weapon that violated not only interstellar conventions, but the ethical foundations upon which they had rebuilt their civilization. The accords that emerged from the summit established new protocols for coexistence. Earth's surface would be gradually reopened for human settlement, with Velkar assistance in restoring damaged ecosystems. Joint scientific initiatives would replace the orbital defense grid with monitoring systems designed for environmental protection rather than warfare. Most significantly, both species agreed to the establishment of shared memorial spaces, places where the victims of both atrocities would be remembered, their names and stories preserved as warnings against the cycle of vengeance. 6 months after the summit, Elena stood in one such memorial on what had once been the plains of Tanzania. The holographic display had been modified to include Velkar designations alongside human names, each representing a life destroyed by the conflict between their peoples. She felt rather than heard Ambassador Wu approach, his footsteps nearly silent on the memorial stone floor. "The Velkar High Council has ratified the final provisions," he informed her. "Their medical specialists will work with our psychologists to address the lingering trauma from the cascade." Elena nodded, her gaze still fixed on the scrolling names. And Dr. Cho? She'll spend the rest of her life under house arrest, but she's been granted access to research facilities. Her knowledge of neural interfaces is being repurposed for healing, rather than harm. A fitting resolution, Elena murmured. Wu studied her profile, concern evident in his expression. You look tired, Elena. I am tired, old friend. She finally turned from the memorial. Tired of carrying a century of ghosts. Yet you saved both species from adding to those ghosts. He gestured to where a Velkar delegation was entering the memorial's far side, their movements solemn and respectful. That counts for something. Does it? Elena watched the aliens approach the holographic display. Or have we simply transformed vengeance into something more palatable? Wu considered this. Perhaps transformation is all we can hope for. Hatred into understanding, fear into caution, vengeance into memory. Together, they walked toward the Velkar delegation, representatives of species that had nearly destroyed each other, now standing before a shared record of loss. No words were exchanged, none were necessary. The simple act of acknowledgement spoke volumes that diplomacy could never articulate. As Elena prepared to leave the memorial, she noticed something unusual in the holographic display. Among the countless names of the dead and traumatized, new designations had begun to appear, names of children born in the months since the summit, human and Velkar alike. Not replacements for those lost, but continuations of what had nearly ended. Not forgiveness, that would take generations, but the possibility of a future not defined solely by the past. She touched the control panel, freezing the display on the name of a Velkar child born 3 weeks earlier. Its designation translated roughly to memory of peace, a hope disguised as a name. Perhaps that was enough for now. As Elena stepped from the memorial into Earth's restored sunlight, she found herself wondering if vengeance ever truly ended. Perhaps it merely transformed, as Wu had suggested, evolving from the raw hunger for retribution into something that could, with time and wisdom, resemble justice. Not in her lifetime, perhaps, but someday. The earth turned beneath her feet, empty no longer, haunted still, but healing. Above, the stars held both promise and warning, a universe vast enough to accommodate both humanity's worst impulses and its capacity for redemption. It would have to be enough.